Further to the Owl of Athena, I had originally thought of symmetries with Zeus, inasmuch as Athena is like a female counterpart to Zeus. So I had Athena's owl as the counterpart to the Zeusian eagle. Thus, the owl is to Athena as the eagle is to Zeus, one nocturnal and one diurnal. Thus the owl here is eagle of the night, the big, sharp-eyed, swooping bird of prey. And indeed many owls are formidable, but they are not the owl of Athena. Rather, her owl is very specifically the so-called little owl, the glauks in Greek. This is the owl in question, so the inquiry becomes an investigation into the owl symbolism of Athena relevant to this owl. The little owl is not a counterpart to Zeus's eagle. That symmetry doesn't supply the relevant symbolism. Glauks is perhaps a pre-Greek word, very old, and its basic meaning is bright. Assuredly, the name refers to the little owl's bright eyes. At some point, though, the word takes the meaning of the colour blue-grey, and this continues from the Greek, so in English there is the adjective glaucous, meaning blue-grey. This is a very interesting shift in meaning. For a start, the little owl has bright eyes, but they're not blue-grey. More likely the shift came from Homer, where glauk, bright, is used to describe the shimmering of light on the sea, with no colour implied. The later elaboration perhaps surmised the colour of the sea to expand upon Homer's text. But that is odd because in any event, blue-grey is not bright. What shade of grey is ever bright? The term becomes tangled because Athena comes to be called owl-eyed or bright-eyed or blue-grey-eyed, all translations of the same epithet, glaukopus, glauk-eyed. I personally suspect that the application of the colour blue-grey to Athena's symbolism is meaningful and integral, not accidental or mistaken. In fact, I suspect that it is an important anomaly, but as yet I'm not sure what it signifies or where it fits in. My suggestion, though, is that it has to do with Athena as a goddess of air, and that the blue-grey is a sky or atmospheric colour, and this explains the shift from bright. Ruskin probably deals with it best, but I haven't pursued it. I'm certain of the most central symbolism, however. It is, of course, the owl's gaze. With any owl or nocturnal bird, you have the symbolism of seeing in the dark, and this is what wisdom does, therefore. In this sense, the owl is wise. But this particular owl, Athena's owl, has a conspicuously wondrous gaze, large glowing eyes, all the more conspicuous on a smaller bird. Why the little owl? Why not the big owl to match the owl of Zeus? It is the little owl because in the smaller bird the important feature is accentuated, namely the large glowing eyes. The big eyes are bigger on the small bird. It is therefore the eyes that hold the key here. I'd also considered the owl as hunter, with an implicit contrast between Athena and Artemis. In that case, the owl is distinguished as a bird of prey that both hunts and thinks. How did Athena move from a war goddess to an intellectual goddess? I thought her emblem, the owl, might provide a link if taken as a model of the thinking hunter. Perhaps, but the eyes of the bird are the central symbolism, and that is why it must be the little owl. Little owls have big eyes. Certainly, those big eyes see in the dark, which is to say, they see what is hidden. The owl tells us that about Athena. Her power is to see what is hidden, and wisdom, Sophia, is seeing what is hidden. There are many extensions of this, but yes, the owl sees what is hidden, a fact underlined by the big eyes of the little owl, and for this reason alone is a fitting emblem for this intellectual goddess. The idea is that nous, penetrates the darkness of existence, sees beyond mere appearances, mind looking into the darkness of ignorance, and so on. That, of course, is the immediate symbolism. More than that, though, the eyes of the little owl seem to glow. This is very important. The eagle is sharp-eyed and has long range and flies high and is solar, but it does not carry its own inner light. The most conspicuous thing about the owl is that its eyes glow in the dark, and it is as though they have their own inner light that they cast onto the objects under their gaze. It is quite a different seeing to that of the eagle. I think this is the peculiar and unusual feature about owls in general, or many of them, but again underlined in the bright glowing eyes of Athena's little owl. So it is not just this owl, that sees in the dark. So do all nocturnal birds. More impressively, this particular nocturnal bird carries its own light into the depths of night. We can say owls in general signify inner light. This fact opens up a web of interconnected symbolisms. For a start, the symbolism is surely lunar in the sense that the moon too brings light into the night, and Athena is certainly a lunar deity who requires a lunar bird. And yet the eyes of the little owl are conspicuously yellow gold, not at all blue-grey, and one would have to describe them as distinctly solar, golden eyes, eyes of the sun. The moon, of course, might be called the sun of the night, so lunar significations are not unimportant. Yet the signature of the bird is somewhat solar all the same. The moon reflects, the sun radiates. The eyes of Athena's owl radiate. The inner light that does the radiating then becomes of primary interest. What light does the owl carry within it by which it illuminates the darkness? Or what inner fire? In any case, the owl keeps it within itself and has it under command. So, is the owl a lunar or solar bird? There's an interesting ambivalence. It is most obviously lunar just by being a bird of the night, and yet it is very solar, especially in regards the feature being underlined, the eyes. The owl of Athena has solar eyes, so the inner light, the inner fire, is the fire or light of the sun. So more fully, the owl signifies something like the sun in the realm of the moon. That is the relation between its solar and lunar natures. The owl is externally lunar, but internally solar. Regarding this inner light, I'm reminded at this point of the account of eyesight in Plato in the dialogue called the Timaeus. It involves both a light coming into the eye and an inner light radiating out, and the actions of seeing are explained in this simultaneous mechanism. Long modern commentaries explain how Plato's knowledge of eyesight was hopelessly faulty, but the projection of an inner light, a light of consciousness, is highly suggestive given the mythological background of the Timaeus cosmology. I want to say what is being described there are the eyes of the autochthon, and that the autochthons have the characteristic of being glaucopus. That is, the account of sight in Plato's Timaeus is an account of owl eyes. The model for the Timaeus account is the apparently radiating eyesight of the owl, and in the context of the Timaeus, Athena's owl. This is how to understand Plato's account of eyesight and seeing. The idea of the inner light projected outwards and meeting the incoming light has its model in the owl. The Timaeus gives an account of the creation of the primal man by the demiurge. Primal man is autochthonous. This is the mythology of the Athena cultus, where the Athenians are descended from the primal autochthon. Plato gives us an account of the eye's anatomy and physiology based on the model of Athena's owl Glaucopus. The text draws attention to this account. The section on eyesight in the Timaeus is out of sequence. More generally, I want to say that the Timaeus is a remarkably visual cosmology. Radiance and solidity produce a visual universe. Seeing is the most important of the senses in the Timaeus. The Egyptian hieroglyph depicting the owl is interesting. Once again, it is the little owl. Among hieroglyphs, it represents the letter and sound M. The Roman representation of the letter M that we use is very old and is a pictogram of water and waves. That association, the sound with water, sea, waves, seems to be very ancient. But in Egyptian hieroglyphs, the letter is shown by a stylization of the little owl. This stylization draws attention to another aspect of the owl that I think is important, another important symbolism, namely that the owl turns. In the hieroglyph, we see the bird's body in profile, but the face is turned full frontal. Frontality, of course, is a common device within Egyptian art, but here I think it is worth noting. The hieroglyph wants to show the way in which this bird turns its face to the object of its gaze. It turns its face to look. It might be objected that sundry birds do this, yet I think it is conspicuous in the owl. It is the gesture that accompanies the bird's radiant gaze. The idea is a turning of attention. When we turn our attention to something in our mind, it is the disembodied correlate of turning our face and gaze to it. The owl represents this. It represents this mental act, the act of turning. So not only is the bird known for its radiant gaze of an inner light, it turns this gaze onto things. This is very particularly the intellectual act that the owl symbolizes. This act of turning the mind is philosophically very interesting, and we could explore it. But for now, I just want to note that the owl, Athena's owl, is emblematic of it, and it is very clear in the Egyptian hieroglyph. An owl is a creature of the turning in another sense. It is associated with the middle of the night, the darkest hour of the night. But the darkest hour is the turning point. It is also where the light begins. That is the owl's symbolic habitat, the turning point of night. Let us always place the owl in that natural context, then, the turning point of the night. In all associations, across all traditions, the owl is a creature of the depths of night and is therefore subject to negative symbolic readings as an ill omen. Actually, that is the norm. It is notably not the case in Athens. The Owl of Athena is not an ill omen. Instead, we have a positive reading of the symbolism of Athena's mythology. Seen positively, the depths of night are the beginning of the dawn, and the owl, carrying an inner light, is a creature of that turning point, and also therefore a creature of all the symbolisms that follow, because that turning point from dark to light is symbolically fecund. We find this symbolism rendered by Coleridge. In fact, Coleridge supplies the key to the essential symbolism of the owl in the first few lines of his poem Christabel. "'Tis the middle of the night by the castle clock, and the owls have awakened the crowing cock, to wit, to who, and hark again, the crowing cock, how drowsily it crew." To summarise it, in the very middle of the night, the owls awaken the cockerel, bird of the rising sun. The poem is a spell and its purpose is to lull us into a certain in-between world, which is a realm Coleridge knew well, not least through the agency of opiates. Kubla Khan is about this realm as well. Mr. Coleridge is concerned with that in-between world of half-sleep. The crowing cock, how drowsily it crew. This is another way to think of the world of the owl. If the dead of night, the turning point, is also the birth of the light, then it is an in-between realm. The turning point is neither one side or the other. The turning point is the pivot of the duality, but outside the duality itself, the point where night and day meet and overlap. The owl, then, is a creature of that middle world. It is the realm of the dream. The owl is emblematic of dreams, since our dreams seem lit by an inner light. Dreaming is a seeing in the dark. More particularly, though, the owl must represent the lucid dream, since the owl not only illuminates, it is aware. In fact, above all, it is aware. Above all, Sophia is an awareness. Conceived as a turning, it is a coming to attention. The Owl of Athene symbolizes this. The deeper symbolism, though, must concern the idea of the sun in the night, which is also to say consciousness in sleep. The wide-eyed owl with its inner light represents the sun at midnight and all the subsequent symbolism that entails. The owl is a creature of the midnight sun. By analogy, its attentiveness, its gaze, is like consciousness in the darkness of sleep. I think this takes us very near to the heart of what the symbolism of the Owl of Athene is ultimately about. We could explore it through a host of parallelisms from that point. That is to say, it's the key that unlocks all the important doors. Finally, philosophy begins in wonder. I think that wonder goes with turning. That philosophical act of turning, like the owl, is also an act of wonder. Wondering and turning go together, and surely there is wonder in the big eyes of the little owl.